and she wasn't going to have any of that. She didn't play with that. Even growing up as a kid, I was introduced to the rolling pin at an early age because it just took one time to get in her flower bed, and you knew what time it was because she didn't play. She took great pride in her work and in her flower bed. It was the showpiece of the neighborhood. Actually, the whole property was. They had a nice big house, they had a beautiful flower garden, and a nice, healthy vineyard. But May the 4th, 1878, my friend Carter was found dead in Silver Creek, lying face down in 18 inches of water. He and Ann had moved to Louisville by this time, and it's believed that he had taken the train over to Silver Creek and got off. His death was investigated, and it was ruled accidental. But by this time, his fortune had plummeted. He did not have what he once had, and a lot of people credited that to his erratic behavior that he was known for. But whatever wrong he did, there was they never questioned his honesty and his integrity. He was a fine man. But I think I've forgotten to tell you a very interesting part of his family story. George Washington Carter was a black man. He was a free black man in 1808. All the things he did in his life, he did as a free black man. He moved from Virginia to Ohio and then settled in New Albany as a free black man. He purchased property here as soon as early as 1829 as a free black man. He purchased multiple lots and ran various businesses here in New Albany as a free black man. He married Rose Ann Wallace, who was also a free person of color, sometimes listed as mulatto or white in the records. Both he and Ann could read and write. They raised 11 children. The oldest, Hannibal, born in 1837, and the youngest born in 1855. Their children were educated. They lived in not only an ordinary house, but in a house that was known as the Excellent Residence, with a flower garden and a vineyard. Wash traveled to Canada, Vicksburg on the Mississippi River, and all the way to California for the gold rush. The things that he did in his life, in the lifetime, were great accomplishments for any man. But for a free black man, living in New Albany, walking the streets, the same streets as the Scribner brothers, they were not just accomplishments, they were unheard of. And that's the story of my friend, George Washington Carter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be moving on this
Are they
way.
buried here?
Thank you.
Actually, that's a good question.
Appreciate
The
that.
grave is unmarked. He is
He is
buried
buried
here,
here.
and one of his daughters, Susie, is buried in here. Yes. And it's in your program. And I'm a member of the Friends of Fairview Cemetery, Stories Behind the Stones, and one of our goals is to mark his grave and his daughter Susie's grave as well. Now, you did hear him talk about being that he owned a barber shop. Well, not only did he own that barber shop, he played barber. He was a barber. He would cut the white people's hair of the Town Clock Church. You know the connection, right? Everybody know the connection of the Second Presbyterian Town Clock Church in New Albany was what? Underground Railroad. So he could talk to these people and time out to help slaves escape. You heard the friend say that he went to Canada often. As a matter of fact, some of his children were taken to Canada. He was one of those connections for slaves that were not free to become free. So you see, he did much more than just own a lot of vineyards and be wealthy. He gave back. And there was also speculation that he would buy slaves, turn around, and free them. So that's quite a man. Now, we heard about how much land that he owned. At one point in time in 1950, the census reports that his real estate value was $6,000, which equals $200,000 in 2016. But later on, there are reports that his real estate value reached as high as $50,000, which today is almost $1 million in 2016. Now, the Schrader Stables, has anybody ever been to the Exchange that on and the Feast Barbecue on Main Street? Have you been there? Do you know what that used to be? I just gave it away because I said it. The Schrader Stables. The Schrader, George and Joe, I believe, they bought the land to put the Schrader Stables on from George Washington Carter. So pretty interesting there. And luckily, some folks restored that. Donna and Steve Resch, they renovated it and leased. They've leased dozens of buildings here, such as like what Wick's Pizza is in, the Bank Street Brew House, Connor's Place, and also helped this renovation get along so that building, which is beautiful, could be restored. If you ever get a chance, hop in there and grab something to eat. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got exposed bridge trusses, and if you go upstairs, you get a view of the Ohio River. It's got 20-foot ceilings, so they kept the character of that carriage house, Schrader Stables, the carriage house. So that's all thanks to George Washington Carter. And I think I covered everything. His death, that he drowned, yes, it was deemed an accident, but you could see that he did have enemies. And you know why. We are going to meet a friend of Governor Ashbel Parsons Willard. The scene is set October 10th, 1870, and this is 10 years after his funeral. The friend is coming back to pay his respects to Governor Ashbel P. Willard. It's a marvelous story about this New Yorker that moved to New Albany around 1845. He was campaigning for Polk, James Polk, but within 7 years' time, he landed in New Albany and liked it. He was elected lieutenant governor, and 4 years later, he became the 11th governor of the state of Indiana. Now, citizens were drawn to Willard when they first met him on the campaign trail. And during his time here, he was loved by many. So this scene is the 10th anniversary of his funeral, and I'm sure we're going to hear some interesting things about his hero. Now, he was called the Silver-Tongue Orator, and the Silver-Tongue Orator. I think we have a lot of those going on right now, don't we? Even he in the wind. Please come in and have a seat.
How are you all doing tonight?
We are doing wonderful.
Glad to hear that. Now, before your person gets here to try and sell you your funeral plot for the night, I'm just assuming that you're also stopping by to pay respects to our long-lost friend and neighbor, our fellow New Albanian, our former governor, personal mentor to myself, though he hardly knew me, I like to think. A man who so young inspired me at such a young age to try and do as much as I possibly can. Certainly you all remember who I'm talking about, Governor Asheville P. Willard. You look like you don't, ma'am. You're not from around here, are you? No? Well, let me take a time to fill in all you non-locals, you non-natives here of New Albany, Indiana. Governor Willard Asheville P. was born on October 31st, 1820 in Oneida County, New York. Now, I'm sure we all know where that is and what things go on there, but his father was the county sheriff, and I like to believe that his humble beginnings as the son of a town sheriff, a county sheriff, and the mother who made sure to watch over him, hover over him, and make sure he was safe all the time, is the reasons he became such a political leader in this great state of ours. Now, as a child, Asheville was greatly afflicted with some unknown illness. We don't know what it was, but what he lacked in body, he made up for in mind. And what he lacked in body and he made up for in mind, he also made up for in spirit and determination. That's right. It was said in his eulogy, which was delivered just a few yards from us over there, just 10 years ago today, that he had the rugged constitution, the unyielding determination to go out, stand, fight, and work just as hard as any other man. And it was that type of energy, in my opinion, that put him in the ground at such a young age. Now, Asheville being the strong-minded person he was, any of you all know what Latin is. I'm certain you took it in school. Asheville did too, along with oration, rhetoric, Greek, mathematics, English, any other subject you could think of, because that's what he got with the liberal arts education from the Methodist College of Hamilton in New York. He went to Hamilton College. He graduated in 1842, and at 22 years of age, so young, went and practiced law. Now again, his afflictions from a childhood came back to haunt him, and he was told by a physician to go up to Marshall, Michigan, and that's where he practiced law for less than 1 year, because he again started feeling sick. He needed a change, a more dry and humid climate. He rode a train down to Chicago, and Chicago bought himself a horse and rode it all the way down to the great state of Texas. Now, he was there for a very, very, very brief period, just a handful of months before he got bored of the Texas weather, probably got tired of the Texas heat, decided he would get on a different horse, maybe the same horse, a horse as a matter of fact, and rode it all the way back up here to the Midwest, where he settled down as a school teacher. This is where I get confused, how he went from being a practicing attorney, a man formerly known as Esquire, not yet governor, but Esquire, and then becomes a Mr. or a Master because he became a school teacher in Carrollton, Kentucky, of all things. It's one thing I never knew about Governor Willard, and I didn't understand, but he was good at anything that he did, because remember, he was strong in the mind and he had great determination. That Louisville would contact him and ask him to come be an administrator of a school there. And he did just that until he quit that position in 1844, because the staunch Democrat in him, like it is in so many of us out here today, because, well, we all elected our friend and family, well, you, and you elected him. You all can't vote. Anyhow, elected him governor of the state of Indiana. But the staunch Democrat he was from the time he was able to vote, from the time he was born, Asheville went out and he stumped for Democrat candidate for president in 1844, James K. Polk of South Carolina. And this was a scary and taboo thing to do across the river, because Speaker of the House of Representatives, Henry Clay, was up to take the White House. He was the one that was going to win this time. He was going to put Kentucky bigger and brighter on the map. He was going to make the thoroughbred state proud, and he failed. In 1845, when James K. Polk was elected President of the United States, he sent people like you just a year later down to Old Mexico to fight. But that didn't matter because Asheville was still here in our fair city of New Albany. In 1844, when he came and did his stumping, my father took me down to see him just down on the river, and we heard him get up on his soapbox and we heard him preach and speak and spread the fiery gospel. James K. Polson. And that was signed, sealed, delivered right there. The people of New Albany did what they could to get him elected. And then we went a step further and tried to invite this silver-tongued orator to come live in our own community. So in 1845, Governor Willard did just that. He packed up all his belongings. He came across the river. He had no friends, no family, no business associates, nobody that he knew on this side of the river, just the few influential and affluential people who approached him. He came over here. He went into practicing law, and within 4 years of knowing nobody, he'd already been married to a lady named Sarah from Connecticut, and he was elected by you, and you, because you all can't vote, to the city council. So thank you for that, because that stepped him one place higher in becoming governor of the state of Indiana. 1849, he's a city councilman, and then again, you, but not you, or you, because you can't vote, elected him to the House of Representatives, the Indiana State Legislature in 1850. He was only 30 years old at the time, and from there in 1852, he became the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Indiana, again, at just 32 years old. He was the 12th Lieutenant Governor, and like the President of the United States, had very few accomplishments as Lieutenant Governor because the Vice President doesn't do anything. Neither does the Lieutenant Governor, really. They just wait for the person in front of them to die. Well, Asheville in 1856 is slapped down as the Democrat nominee for the Governor of the state of Indiana. And again, you, and you, all turned, and you, all, because you all can't vote, all turned out to elect him the 11th governor of this great Hoosier state. And he did just that. His notable accomplishments were putting the bridge that so many of us cross every day trying to go into the wharfs of Louisville. He put up the first K&I Railroad Bridge, didn't put it up and erect it during his legacy and time here, but he began the program planning, the paperwork to get the process, the allocation of funds. He was a huge mover on prison reform. So when your brother went to jail for stealing a chicken down in Jeffersonville and was at the state penitentiary, Asheville realized it was inhumane to have so many people confined to such close quarters. He decided that Congress, well, the state legislature, I apologize for that, the Indiana state legislature should rally the funds together and build one on the opposite end, not south, but north by the Great Lake, for another prison. And that's why we now have two in this fair state, two prisons, all because of Asheville's kind heart and keen mind. Well, like so many politicians nowadays, he did have one little tarnish, stain, sordid moment on his career, and that would come when you were in the Marines, sir, and you were fighting with Robert E. Lee, Colonel, United States Army. I'm certain you remember those days. You do. This is before Lee's going to go ahead and betray us like he did a few years back in the war. I'm sure you remember that war, sir. You look like you fought valiantly. Anyhow, Lee's going to lead a group of men to Harper's Ferry, Virginia, as you all remember, to stomp out the abolitionist cause led by John Brown. Now, the brother-in-law of Asheville has been known to gallivant all around the United States. His brother-in-law, John, was a Kansas Jayhawker. Again, he was from Connecticut because, his sister was from too and married the governor. And he went out to Kansas. He fought in the Kansas Jayhawk Wars in the 1850s. He met John Brown there, and he followed John Brown to Virginia, where they began the program planning again to try and take over the Harper's Ferry Arsenal and then start a slave rebellion and attempt to end slavery in the southern states. As we all know, John Brown's cause failed. Many of his followers were killed. The remainder were captured, and so was Asheville's brother-in-law, John. Now, John was put in prison. He was put on trial for treason and inciting a riot, but more importantly, treason, because that's a federal offense. Governor Willard, trying to use the power that he had and the political strength, went south. But being a northern governor in this time that's changing in American history, going to ultimately fail. He's going to lobby to the governor of Virginia for a gubernatorial pardon. He's going to fail there. He goes and he stands as a character witness for his brother-in-law there, and he fails again. Defeated, exhausting every resource he had, he and his party that he came there with went back to Indianapolis, and on December 16, 1859, his brother-in-law was hanged for treason. Well, the spirit of revival and abolitionist movements are coming again. Asheville is kind of on that stance, having attended a Methodist college, and Indiana being such a strong Presbyterian state as it was at the time, decided that he was going to go lobby and stump for presidential candidates across this state. He was going to try and protect the Union, and in 1860, he was getting sick in Indianapolis. He decided that he was burning himself out, and physicians told him, you need to go get different air. He went up north to Minnesota, and there on October 4th, 1860, he died. The funeral process began. He was brought back to the state of Indiana. He laid in state. At 39 years old, the youngest governor was the first one to die in office. His body was brought back to Jeffersonville, where it was received by over 10,000 mourners, over 40 pallbearers, where that afternoon when the train arrived at 3 p.m., it took it 6 hours to get here to Fairview Cemetery, where he was laid to rest just a few paces to our left. So now you know, ma'am, outsider, that we have a great man buried just a few yards from us over there. Great governor, the 11th governor of the state of Indiana, Asheville P. Willard. So I hope that his strength and determination at such a young age inspires you, and whatever age you are, to go out and continue trying to do great things. Thank you. Have a nice
So
night.
much. Thank you so much.
Not that tall stone, but it's like 4 rows is next to it. It's hard to see because it sits down lower. But, are you still recording? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Hey, Marty, was
Yes.
it, yeah, his
Then the
is just,
lieutenant governor, then the governor, then studied law, then a traveler and a teacher, and
no, I was trying to figure out, who's the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the house that's buried over there?
oh, I don't know.
Oh, I think
His name was Kern.
I think it's Kern, because Asheville
that
is just,
must be him.
yeah, because Asheville's just, I think, 2 rows over from him.
And I was gonna have,
Just
I
that.
had lots more to say, but he said
One of those tall ones.
he was actually, they were all for the states deciding about the slaves, before Lincoln, and this was all before Republican Lincoln came in and the Civil War started. Even though he was more for, hey, states, you all just decide about the slaves, he still went to try to help out his brother-in-law, who ended up being hung. It was Carolyn Cook's brother. 1847, he married Caroline Cook, and they had 3 children, and it was her brother who was hung in that Harper Ferry raid because he was involved in that. Now, the signing of the Indiana State Constitution. In this scene, we are going to be doing some time traveling. We're going to start off at June 28, 1856, and then move back 40 years to June 28, 1816, which was the night before Indiana's Constitution was signed. And we will first meet Elizabeth Pennington, who is the widow of a wonderful man named Dennis Pennington. Dennis Pennington was a politician, a Methodist, a Whig, a farmer, a stonemason, a speaker of the Indiana Territory from 1810 to 1816, House of Representative from 1822 to 1846, both the House and in the Senate, and opposed slavery. He passed away just over a year ago in this scene. We're going to find Betsy, Dennis's wife, still in her mourning clothes. Later in the scene, we'll meet Patrick Shields. He is buried here in Fairview, right by the stone there, doing the scene. We're going to meet Patrick Shields and John Kennedy Graham. Patrick Shields was born in Ireland. He defended the Indiana border from hostile Indians He was a private in Henry Harrison's army at the Battle of Tippecanoe, where his horse got a bullet in his head, but he got that horse on home. Later on, he was Judge Shields, he was one of the first pioneer settlers here in Floyd County. And we're also going to meet John Kennedy Graham, who's going to be in the scene, who also signed the Indiana State Constitution, along with Pennington and Shields. And John Kennedy Graham was a surveyor who surveyed the Buffalo Trace. Pardon me. Let's head on to the scene. Come on in and have a seat. Oh, there she is. Oh, Mrs. Pennington. It's so good to see you out this beautiful evening.
Thank you. Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
My daughter insisted that I come up with them today. My son-in-law had business in town. Since Mr. Pennington is gone, I have little interest in visiting or getting out and about as I used to. But I think of him often, and I feel that he is always nearby. You know, he was born 80 years ago, this year of 1856, and he was born in 1776. New Country was born not too long afterwards. I think of him in those times when we were young, and he was determined to come out here. He wanted to come out to this new western land because he knew that the opportunities were out here. He knew that it would grow, and he wanted a part of that. He wanted to be in on the adventure of all of that. And so he and Mr. Henry Clay came out ride and tie all the way from Virginia. That was how I happened to meet him. I had been living with the Cherokee for more than a decade and had no intention, no memory that I had had any other life. But then my brother Matthew came and brought me back. I'd forgotten English. And Mr. Pennington would tell me all sorts of stories. He would tell me about all the things he had read in books. I knew that that was important, to be able to read and to write, and especially with this new country, if you were going to be voting for things. And my goodness, Mr. Pennington was determined to be part of that voting process. He was determined to come over here and start in this Northwest Territory. They were trying, like everything, to get slavery introduced here and to make it legal in this Northwest Territory. Mr. Pennington was absolutely determined that that would not happen. He favored squatters' rights because all of these speculators buying up land and then not ever coming out here to work on the land and to know each other and to build a new country, no, it had to go to the people who were actually here. Indiana, land of the Indians. And then we kicked them all out. Sorry business then. But the slavery issue, it came up at that first meeting at Springdale, and Mr. Pennington saw to it that it did not pass, and he was staunchly opposed to it even then. He got elected into the territorial legislature and stayed there, territory and state, almost 30 years. So many things to remember. But that Constitutional Convention, he was elected to that as well. And they were hammering out that Constitution, the courthouse on the hill. Mr. Pennington hadn't had a chance to finish the fine stone building down on the square, and so they were in a double cabin up there on the hill. And you can imagine why they went down to the old elm tree. That was 43 men jammed into that little cabin area. So they went down under the big tree and had a cool breeze and a nice spring there and hammered out that Constitution. He came home one day and he said, "Well, Betsy, I've put it in the Constitution. Education will be free for the children of all landholders in the state of Indiana." fixed him with an eye, and I said, you'll make it free for all children, Dennis Pennington, or you needn't bother coming home again. I knew that he had just disremembered what we had talked about, but I meant what I said. Shortly before he died, Mr. Pennington told me that there's 10 or 12 more states now, and most of them have included that article in their constitutions. I think that's a mighty fine legacy.